This, my friends, is the 2020 Union Falcor binding. I've been riding these on a lot of different boards, using these mainly with my Adidas tactical ADVs, and I was really impressed at how well they can just integrate with kind of any board from, you know, like from the channel system with Burton. You can see these two holes right here, to the, you know, to any traditional disc binding, and the adjustability is really good. And it looks very similar in some aspects to last year's Union Falcor, the 2019, except for just a couple things. First off, you can see the ankle strap. The ankle strap this year was pretty much passed down to the Strata. So that has that ankle strap now. And now we've got this new big, lighter, full plastic strap that is more supportive, has a nice pre-curve, has a little comfort patch right here. And then the big thing is, let me hold these discs here. They went from kind of like an EVA foam, and I don't know if you can see it, but we got a lot of nice sunlight going on here right now. And you can see this one's EVA foam, kind of like Union bindings have always been, right? This one has a more rubbery bottom, kind of more like, more like the Strata is now. And that's done two real major things for this binding. It's given it more support and more dampness. You definitely feel a difference going from that binding to this binding. When we look at the high back flex, one of the things for a binding this responsive and for a high back this high, you would really think that like having a twist like this would really affect the edge-to-edge response, but it doesn't. It's got kind of like a medium stiff flex. It's very stiff this way, just only a touch of give at the top, along here. But good twist, so it doesn't bite into your calves too much. I still prefer the Strata's slightly lower high back and the slightly softer high back of the you know, of the Atlas right there. It's my old Atlas. Sorry, I didn't bring one of my newer pretty ones, but just forgot about it. Speaking of adjustability to the boot, one thing I really like is this heel loop. You can push it in 3 notches or pull it out 3 notches, basically. It's got 0, 1, and 2. And now they have this new like little adjustability. They changed this screw system. I put in a different washer and it never comes loose anymore. So, you know, if you had old Union bindings before, these would often come loose on you. They don't anymore. One drawback is, and it's kind of a stiffer high back, it's not super stiff. You know, they made sure it has some give, but I wish, you know, this construction had the 2-hole option like this does. I don't know if you can see this like the Strata, but the Strata has, we'll let that go. The Strata has 2 holes here so you can rotate the high back and dial it out for your boot. This only has 1 hole, so if you run on the small or the large size of this medium, then like I did, I had to push it all the way in for me to be properly on this gas pedal. And I didn't like that. I wish it had that high back rotation so I could, you know, make the magic happen. If I pulled out one side, which a lot of you will be able to do, but some of you won't. If you pull out one side further than the other, you can get some high back rotation as long as you're on the, you know, on the gas pedal, on the toe ramp. But that's one adjustability limitation compared to, let's say, the next step down on like the Strata. And then the Atlas is just a whole different, it's just the super adjustability binding. You can pull the heel loop out. You can rotate the high back on its own. You can pull the toe ramp out or in, so you can basically center your boot perfectly in your binding before you even put it on the board. This one, you might have to turn the discs this way and slide it, you know, toe to heel to get it centered. But there is a chance that, you know, with this heel loop, you can get it dialed out right. And you really need to be on this gas pedal to feel this binding's response. It can really lack on a toe side turn if you don't have it set up right. Now, if you get it dialed out right, you can turn it sideways and then make sure you can get any kind of stance width you want. And I like a mini disc for that because the stance width adjustability is great with mini discs. It's almost as good as the Union Atlas full-size disc that can mount like a mini disc, can slide really far for a full-size disc, and really do a lot of cool things. But this Falcor just is so sexy and so damp compared to the Atlas. It's got a cooler ankle strap. I like the Atlas ankle strap, but it doesn't have as much pre-curve as this does. You can see this just, like, even when it's off, it's not like going way out. And you can see right here, I don't know if you can, but this just is almost straight. It has very little pre-curve. It doesn't wrap around, and it doesn't quite have the response that this does, although the Atlas is close. It's definitely a bump up from the Strata. So the ratchet system, speaking of, is super smooth. Years ago, when I first started reviewing Union bindings, their ratchets had, they were a little sticky, they held a little too tight, but they dialed it back a little bit, tweaked it, and that's one of the things I love about Union. They constantly listen to criticism and try to learn and grow from it. And they really do, they really did a great job with their ratchets. They've come like, they're a night and day difference from the old ratchets like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. They're just so amazing now, and they're some of the best in the industry. I've ridden a lot of their bindings are my choices for the bindings I take out when I'm testing boots and boards. And I just love how well these ratchets have held up. I haven't had to replace one yet. And some of these bindings, like that Union Atlas right there, has hundreds of days, I think now. I think that's like 4 years, 3 years old, 4 years old, and has, you know, lots of days on it every year. And they hold up well. So, you know, as far as the ratchet system goes, it's great. This toe strap is one of the best in the business. This rubbery toe strap almost never comes off my toe, and it cranks over the toe really well and pulls you in to this high back, so you have very good boot support. And then this is even more supportive than last year's Falcor, and it really just locks you in, but it's still not terrible. You still have, you know, some freedom of movement. And I just love the way Union has been taking their ankle straps. Years ago, you know, this would have been a thin little band, and that was fine, except for when you get into uneven terrain and then you just kind of felt your boot folding over and your ankle was out there alone and exposed. Now you feel like you've got just as much support as Flux and Burton and all these other guys out there that were offering like such big supportive ankle straps. So it's great to see. It's great to see the support factor come up for a binding for people who like to charge, power through chunder, and really just might have to deal with a lot of uneven snow. This is great support. And it's very comfortable. I didn't feel a pressure point. The one complaint is, like I said, not being able to rotate the high back. For some reason, even with this twist, I did feel some bite into my calves unless I pulled this one side out so it would match, you know, the angle of the heel. But other than that, that's, you know, the comfort factor is pretty high with this guy. And the turn initiation is very fast. Yes, like the Ultra FC and the Ultra are very responsive bindings, especially the Ultra FC. That's kind of like next level. That's like, you know, five 0.4, you know, out of 5. This is more kind of like, you know, high 4s, low 5s. But what I like about this now is this damper, way damper because of this rubber. It's just a bomber, and it's got a fast damper feel. It's not as butterable, it's not as buttery as it was before. You feel this rubber now, especially like switching back and forth on like my Gentum stick and riding it on the Capita Mercury that I have here. This just has, you know, a dampness to it, a shock absorbing property to it, where this felt responsive and light, but a little more buttery, but a little more chattery. So, you know, I'm stoked that they did this, because it really just matches this ultra aggressive Travis Rice style personality, for those of you who, you know, fancy to ride like him, and can stay out of the hospital when you try. That's pretty cool. But you know, this turning experience, the buttering, the feel underfoot, I feel all has improved for what this binding wants to be. And I think it's a nice step up over last year's Falcor. Also, this colorway is just, I don't know, something about it just works for me. And I've tried this with multiple boards now. Like, I'll put the list down below. It's just, it escapes me at this point. And, you know, shock absorption. It's even more shock absorbent than before. It's right, almost right there with the Strata. I think the Strata is a little more, maybe the Atlas is just a touch more, but it's all so close. The only real drawback is adjustability, with like high back rotation. If you're on the small or large size, you know, high back rotation. If you're kind of in the middle, like, you know, if you're a 9 without a reduced footprint boot, like I'm a 9, but I'm in an 8.5 boot that's very reduced in footprint, so it's almost like a 7.5. So this just barely fits in here. But if you're a true 9 in a normal boot with a normal footprint, or you're a 9.5 or 10, this is going to be glorious. If you're in that off sizing, you know, if you're just about an 11 or a 10.5, you know, which is kind of like the cutoff point for most people. We've gotten a lot of 10.5s and 11s in these, but it depends on your boot though. Some 11s aren't going to fit this, some 10.5s won't fit this, but then some will. Just all depends on the boot footprint. But all in all, super impressed with the Falcor. It's just a fun binding. It's still a good ride favorite, even more so. It's not a perfect fit for my boot, but man, is it a great binding for those who want maybe almost as much response as those ultra super expensive Union bindings that really sit on that super high area of the price point spectrum. This doesn't have that price point, but like, it's expensive, but it's not super expensive, and gives you almost as much as those, if not maybe even more, with this, you know, with this new, you know, bottom. It's just so damp and so rubbery, and I really didn't think I'd notice that much of a difference, but I did. So there you go.